Blackbeard here. Yes, I've always felt somewhat pirate-like. That's why I'm covered in pirate tattoos. Morning! This guy's looking at me like I'm mad. He's looking at me like I'm a pirate from another time zone. How you doing, bro?
Alright, mate.
Yeah. So, things to talk about today. Well, I mean, one of them is the beautiful weather. I was speaking to a friend of mine in relation about fungi, because he's an avid fungi forager also. And he's saying, yeah, it's dry where he is as well, and he's down in London. And, London region. And I'm concluding that, well, it's because the fungi still think it's summer. Because this week we are scheduled in Leicester to have 23 degrees. Now, that's almost as hot as we'd ever get in the summer. And so we've had, a turnaround. And that's why the birds are singing again. You see, look, I'm always saying this, when you're finally tuned in, you just notice a lot of stuff. Now, for this past week, it's been drizzly, overcast, often pissing it down. It's been chilly, and it really has felt like autumn is setting in. And I'm like, oh God, I've got to walk, let's say 150 times to the gym, or cycle to the gym in the pissing rain, and not a single bird singing, no buds on the trees, and all that sort of thing. And to be honest, I'm really not keen of November, December and January. If I could, I would always leave the country for those months. And when I have done in the past, which has been many, many years, I've always really relished the fact that you can leave the nastiness behind. You leave in the fall and then come back in the spring. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's just like you're slipping in and out of dimensions. You don't have to be here and do this thing. If you can just pack a bag and then go and live, on the coast in a sunny region or something like that. Like I used to be able to for, all my life prior to now. But now I have to cut my suit according to my cloth. And so, when the sun is shining like this, the fungi think it's still summer. And they're like, it's too hot for us. Because if we pop out and we get 23 degrees, we're going to frazzle, fry and die. So they know about that. Can you imagine, people? Are you in with the intelligence of the cosmos and the world? How they just read everything. And when I'm always walking around, December, January, I'm always very, very observant of any buds starting to come on the bushes and trees. And some years, see that clicking? There's the robin mate up there. Yeah, and so some years, right at the end of January, beginning of February, the buds start to come on the trees and bushes. And we have to know that nature knows it's not going to be getting any severe weather. How does it know this? I mean, for instance, we could have had a very mild winter, and that could have brought it on. Or even if we didn't have such a mild winter, there were, the usual amounts of frost and things like that. Nature knows that there's not going to be any more. They can sense the atmospheric changes. And, it really is incredible. And so, the birds are singing like it is summer again. Or even spring. Because in late summer, they stop singing once they've done all their child rearing and mating. So, this video then primarily is about paying attention to the details. Now, a friend of mine says to me about one of the videos I put up yesterday where I'm observing the light and the shadows and this, that and the other on this river. He said that I should take up photography with an eye like that. And I've always had a keen eye for good photos, but I haven't took photos in many, many years now. Because I said to him, well, I would much rather talk about what I see and express to people who are listening what I see, because what I know about photos is this: the vast majority of people will look at a photo, they won't give it any consideration how much time and skill has gone into capturing that particular photo. You know, when you see photos in magazines, they are the best of the best people, and these magazine people pay thousands of pounds for any particular shot because they know what is a good photo and they know how to draw the attention of the viewer, but the viewer doesn't know why their attention is being drawn, but it's for very subtle unconscious reasons. And so, for instance, you can see a photo of a lake in a mountainscape, and the lake reflects exactly a mirror image of the mountain, and birds flying above and the shadows of ducks on the water and all that sort of thing. Do you think it's a bit too dark? I think it is a bit too dark, really, but within a week it'll be starting to get lighter. I'm quite happy with that. You know, when I've got these dreadlocks, I start to mess around and I just start to go with different colours and shit like that, because I think what happens is, like what happened last time, I'll just mess around with different colours until I'll get tired of them, and then I'll cut them off, and I don't know whether I'm going to cut them off or what's going on, but I just think, like, well, just change the colour, why not? Just to grow the beard, man, I'm going to grow it down here, I'm going to grow it down there so my squirrel babies can live in it. Yes, that's what I want to do. Wouldn't that be fun? And so, people don't appreciate the details. They don't know why they're captivated because they've got no understanding of their own psychology. But you see, unless people are artists, when people are artists, of course, they have a trained eye. When people are art critiques, they have a trained eye. They know what they're looking at. They know the skill of what it takes to paint this or draw that or create this, because they've been trained in that realm, and maybe they had a natural eye for it and a deep interest in the beginning. And so they see a vast amount more than the average Joe. The average Joe will flick through magazines, they'll see a beautiful scape of a mountain or a forest, and they won't even think twice about it. And if people like mountainscapes and forests, they'll look at it and go, oh, that's a nice picture, and then quickly turn the page. They won't stop to scan the whole picture for about 10 or 15 minutes to look at all of the finer details and ask how the photographer came to that perspective. You know, the time of day is massive, the time of year is massive. There's so many things to be taken into consideration when we, take photos. So I knew a little bit about this, but what I knew more about was the human psychology would never pay any attention. And the reason why I stopped taking photos, because when I was living in Australia for a year, where my daughter was conceived, me and my partner, we took about 1,000 photos in the old days, when it was you'd take a photo and you'd have to develop the film. And so we were developing all these films and sending big thick wads back by airmail, costing us a fortune, to friends and family in the UK. But what I realised when I got back and I was showing other friends who I hadn't sent photos to, they'd just be flicking through like 1, 2, 3, and we'd be going, no, look, there is this and that's that, and that's where we live. Oh, yeah, flick. And whenever I was showing any photos to my male friends, it's like the only thing that they were interested in is only tits in there. Flick, all the beautiful places and everything like that. I went to some incredible places in Australia. I travelled 13,000 miles around the whole continent and had some amazing places, photos, because there are amazing places there. But people flick, and I'm like, I have wasted my fucking time. The only people that appreciated these photos were my partner's parents. Doting parents really wanted to know what she was doing and took an interest. Anybody else, they just weren't interested. And so I thought, well, I'll never do that again. But what I obviously took from that was that instead of showing people photos, you can talk to them about the places you went, and they are much more interested and receptive to that. So whenever I came back, showed my friends photos, just looking for tits, but if I started speaking about all the stories and the adventures, wow, I'd captivate them for hours on end. And they would always say to me that they love it when I go away, because I always come back a different person. I come back more evolved and more broader and, of course, more experienced. And I tell them a whole array of stories. Fighting and fucking stories and adventure, Indiana Jones and all this sort of stuff. Because I'd go to far-flung countries on my own, people, third world countries and all the rest of it. And so you experience a lot of stuff when you do that. So I knew then that they were really potentially able to be captivated. And so I thought, well, that's my niche. I'll ditch the idea of photography, of travelling around the world and then trying to bring my experiences back by photos. Can't do it. But if you write about it, then most people's ears prick up, even if they don't really have an interest in the particular subject or place. They do find it fascinating to look into somebody else's life. So I said to my friend, who said to me, oh, maybe you should take up photography. And I went, what I've said basically in a condensed version. Because, when people are photographers and they've got a great eye and they really take a lot of time to do this and to do that, and people just go, how disappointing is that? I once met a photographer in one of the Cape Verde Islands, and he would go to these islands. There's about 7 or 9 islands in the Cape Verdes in the Atlantic Ocean, just down from the Canary Islands, the Portuguese. And so I travelled about 5 of those islands, and they're absolutely stunning, volcanic and all different sorts of things. And this guy would go there every year for his holiday, and he would walk across the mountains and everything like that, and he would set up his camera and he would take slow reflex photos, whatever. He'd take the photo over about 5 minutes, and he'd do these landscapes, and they were superb, in all different sorts of weather conditions. But he would say that invariably people will never appreciate them. But what he does, he sells them to magazines and people like that. So, to convey an image is much better than presenting an image, and so. There we have it, people. It's many people, they can't really pay attention to the details, and I'm always speaking about the details. Open your eyes and look, and the details increase exponentially when the sun is out, because the sun gives the glory to anything. If there's no sun, there really is little glory. But when the sun is out, and you've got all the different hues and shades and shadows and flickers, well, it's like Tinkerbell has sprinkled her fairy dust all over whatever it is you're looking at. And so some of us were aware that with artists, when they can capture light, when they started to capture light, that's when art really went into a new dimension. Because if you look through the history of art, people, you'll see landscapes and you'll see portraits and everything like that, but they would never get involved with the flick of light in the eye. That came about much later, or the shadow from the nose on the face, just very, very subtly, something like this. The pictures would be, they wouldn't be what was really there. And this is something, you know, when we look into art and we see the evolution of art, it's really, really bizarre. And you know, it's strange how all things go through an evolution. And you know, you would think that we're the same minds and the same consciousness as people 1,000 years ago. But then when you look at their art and you see, well, they've done this wonderful portrait, but it doesn't really look that real. There's something odd about it. And what's odd about it is that they haven't actually painted what was really there, i.e., you know, the difference in the light from one side of the face to the other, or if there's a light above. I suppose in the old days there's not too much light, it was all done under candlelight, and so they never really, that's probably why, because they used to have to use their imagination. And I don't know, they would have to paint in broad daylight, and they didn't want the picture being compromised by a squinting of the eye or casting of a shadow on the face or something like that. So yeah, it's all very, very curious. But to look at the details, to listen to the details, people. Now, we really do need to listen to people as well. And there's been many, many occasions in my life, if I had really, really listened, then I would have saved myself a lot of hassle and a lot of money. There was one occasion when I was prospecting, building in Bulgaria, Eastern Europe, and I had this property and I needed to spend a lot of money on it. And so I hired this builder, and this builder gave me a quote. And whilst I was driving around with this builder, he spoke very good English, he said to me that he's got this 10-year-old son who he wants to get into Oxford or Cambridge University. And he said, I'm going to do anything to make that happen. That was just one line within, you know, a whole day's travelling around and talking. And I remembered that, and it went into my brain, but it never really computed with the level of magnitude that it should have. Because what actually happened was, I accepted his quote and I gave him an advance of £22,000 to start the work. Well, I never saw that money again or the proceeds of the work. And then, of course, I kicked myself as I remembered every single day of my life, you know, for a while. I'm going to do absolutely everything to make that happen. And so what I did was I just gave him the opportunity to do that. How would he not take it? You know, a poor person from Bulgaria, £22,000 was a lot of money. And, you know, it was most certainly halfway towards paying for 3 years in Cambridge at that time. I mean, these days, university is about £30,000. I don't know what an education in Cambridge or Oxford is. It's probably £150,000. You know, something like that. But anyway, of course he was going to take the money. If I had, I've just thought about it, if I'd have contemplated on those words a little bit more, I would have saved myself that money and a whole lot of hassle. So the attention to detail, people, and when we're listening to people, invariably people will tell us what they're going to do all the time. They won't be aware of it, but they can't help you, but can't help themselves, but tell you what they're going to do most times if you listen carefully. And then when they do something, you look back and you go, yeah, they actually said they were going to do that, or they most certainly made very, very close inferences to those actions. And so, what can we say about this? Well, I mean, we have to we have to experience, and then when we experience, if we are the learned variety of people, then we will learn from our experiences and our mistakes, and hopefully we won't make the same or similar mistakes again. Of course, it's not a foregone conclusion, because there's lots of things lots of areas we can fuck up in, but yeah, if we pay the attention, and if we listen, and if we watch actions, and if we listen, and if we look at how people live their lives and the sort of things they do, then you'll work out certain propensities. I mean, for instance, look, if you take a girlfriend or a boyfriend and they start talking about copious amounts of partners, well, you might assume that you're not the last. And even though they tell you how they love you and they're devoted to you and they want to be with you, you might just bear in mind that they've had copious amounts of partners before, and this could just be a whim or a fad, the same as all the rest of them. So keep the ears perked up, keep your eyes peeled, keep your heart open, and keep your mind free, people. And then you will absorb a whole lot more information than you would when you're normally going around thinking that you know everything. You see, what the egoic mind does, for simplicity, it tells us that it knows everything. And so how many of you have really looked at trees? How many of you look at trees in great detail every single day? How many of you think you know what an oak tree looks like? Oh, that's just an oak. You don't know that there's at least 30 different varieties of oaks in this country alone, and hundreds worldwide. And every single tree, they have hybrids, and they are very different from one another. So when you think in your infinite naivety that, oh, if you know one tree then you know them all, you most certainly don't. And you can apply that to absolutely everything. When you start to open up your mind, heart and ears and eyes and everything like that, you will see that absolutely shocking to you, that you never really saw anything. And so, when people are walking around their everyday business, their egoic mind is negotiating and navigating, and there's an objective that they want to achieve, and that's all they're focused on. And all the rest of the stuff is nonsensical, unimportant, peripheral stuff, according to the ego, because it's got a job in mind or an intention. But trust me, people, the details are vastly important. And when you're walking to the office, or when you're doing anything, you'd be well advised to pay the greatest of attention to everybody and everything. And that way then, you'll gather up an enormous amount of knowledge and experience and wisdom.